So first, of course, I don't know whether to read this or to use it for weightlifting. It's quite something. Chetan was saying just a little ahead of this that all his books could possibly fit into this. But really, I wanted to ask you, because all... Is your mic working? So I wanted to begin by asking you, do you choose your subjects or do the subjects choose you? Because they tend to border on not just the controversial, but the explosive.
Thank you, Kaveri. A great pleasure to be here and always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks to ABP for inviting me here. No, that's always been something I've also been thinking about, that very varied characters, right from the Mysore family on whom I started writing on, to Gohar Jan, who was India's first woman and artist to record her voice on the gramophone, to Balachandar, to Savarkar, and now Tipu Sultan. And in the middle, I also did something on Kashi Vishwanath, and also 15 unsung heroes and heroines of India. I think we don't choose our topics. Whatever I've planned, that never happens. Serendipity has been the leitmotif of my life, so to say, at least of my literary career. And so I think I choose topics or people whose lives are interesting. It's not monochromatic. Something that either people have forgotten about, or someone who is much maligned, misunderstood, and misrepresented. So somehow this onus of putting them in perspective and context, destiny seems to always give to my very slender shoulders.
But I must say, and by the way, I must say that this is, we are very privileged because I think this is one of the first times you're discussing this book.
That's right.
So thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Copies of it are available outside along with your earlier books as well. And please do take a look at them and get them signed. It's very rare to have an author like Vikram here. But Vikram, reading this book last night was really an eye-opener. Because there are two things. One, Tipu has been so much a part of our popular culture with the sword and all that auction. And I remember the Vijay Mallya auction and became such a big thing, the Doordarshan series. So to represent someone who's so much a part of popular culture and people look at him in a particular way, what is the kind of documentation that you have to go through to sort of deconstruct the person?
Yeah, person like Tipu Sultan, and I'm really happy to have this first conversation around this new book which has not yet hit the stand, so to say.
Yeah. So
and we've already gone for a reprint. So that's what my publishers told me. And so to have it in Hyderabad, because Hyderabad and its history is very closely intertwined to Tipu's story. And Hyderabad makes a lot of appearance in the book, considering the Nizam and he were blow hot, blow cold, sometimes allies, sometimes friends and enemies and all of this. And 18th century India was a mishmash of so much of chaos. And I think it was the very defining century where India lost steam. And that is when we succumbed to final, colonial occupation of the country. So the book, its content, and the geographical context, all that becomes very important. To your question, Kaveri, I think Tipu, I know, is a very, in-your-face kind of a character, both in popular media, but more so, unfortunately, in politics. Because all sides of the spectrum use him to appropriate him for their own political agendas. I come from Karnataka, in Bangalore, where the Congress government there raised a lot of heckles by celebrating Tipu Jayanti, which caused a lot of anguish among several communities who to this day have intergenerational trauma and memories associated with whatever Tipu Sultan had done. And on the other side, you had even the BJP, which in the run-up to the 2023 elections manufactured this total myth of Uri Gowda and Nanje Gowda, two people who they claimed were responsible for killing Tipu Sultan, something that no Mysore historian, British or otherwise, had even mentioned their name. And what was the reason to do that? You eulogize a Gowda chieftain and you get the Vokkaliga vote in Karnataka elections, which sadly backfired on them. So in the midst of this, where history becomes such a handmaiden for politics and for ulterior motives, I think it is the responsibility of a historian to put things in perspective, illuminate the archives, and bring them to public perception, because the public is not generally so interested to go to all the papers. So for this book, I actually spent 4 long years rummaging archives both in India and more so outside, in France and in London. The British kept copious documents and documentation, so that also comes very handy. Lot of literature in Indian regional languages, Kannada, Marathi, the Peshwa daftars, which had a lot of documentation. So there's never a dearth of documentation. It just needs somebody who can go and tie that all together in an interesting narrative.
Which it is. It's a fascinating narrative, but also your own experience earlier of having your effigies burnt, etc., at a very young age, and your promise to your mother while she was still alive that you would not do anything to endanger yourself. Yes. Because it is so contentious. Anything you write about Tipu, I mean, a 14-year rule, but still so 17, but so contentious.
Yes. Yeah, as you mentioned, my first book came out when I was 26 or 27.
Must be the youngest person to have his effigy burnt.
Yes, perhaps. So this was just a conversation like this I was having in some place in Bangalore, and suddenly, and I was talking about Tipu's attempts of conversions, destruction of places of worship, which is documented in his own letters. I was just reading his letter, and because of that there was a fracas in the audience. The function had to be stopped midway, and I was ushered to the green room. My poor father was sitting in the first row, and someone went and gave him a pamphlet saying, he's your only son, if you want him to live long, please ask him to mind what he talks. And so obviously that night there was a hullabaloo at home, and my mother asked me to vow that I will never talk about Tipu Sultan in public. I kept the vow with her. I'd actually written an article around the divans of Mysore, the first being Purnaya. And in that there was some reference to Tipu Sultan, which again created such a furore. And right in the heart of Bangalore city, in MG Road, in front of the newspaper office, people burnt my effigies, they burnt copies of my book, all of that happened. This was 2008 or 9, and I've come a long way since then, where I used to be so sensitive and scared about what people's reactions will be. But I feel, Kaveri, after 17 years of being in the profession of a historian, that if a historian starts worrying about all of this, nothing can come out. Because everything in this country is contentious. Sentiments getting affected is a very, very flimsy line. You don't know what will offend whom. So I think my only shield, protective shield, is my conscience and my utmost adherence to the craft of a historian. Right. So that's why 200 pages of this very bulky book are end notes and bibliography, references. Nothing I'm saying is from my hat. It's all based on facts and documentation, and I think that is how history needs to be. Itihasa, the Sanskrit word for history, translates to it thus happened. Ye aisa hua. So if it has happened this way, show the proof of that, and that seals the matter.
Right. So we'll come to the report card of Tipu later, good, bad, and undetermined. But really what also comes through, as you were saying, is that India of the 18th century was such a fraught country. I mean, there were so many colonial powers here, contesting for the same riches, and a lot of greed on the part of the British as well, and the French. But I find, and increasingly a lot of historians like you are actually showing that the British were as vicious and as greedy as anyone else. They just had better PR. And you do that very well when you show how they painted, their painters sort of painted a particular version of the truth, and I don't know how many documents they translated, but how many they destroyed perhaps, we don't know. So I think that is a very interesting point, that the French, when you look at the way the French talk about this century, it's very different obviously from the way the British talk about it. And what was happening in the world at that time was also very significant. So please talk about that. And when you talk about 1799, the end of Seringamapatnam, is also in a way the seeds of the first war of independence being sown there, right? So talk a little about that.
So the 18th century, as you said, was a century of chaos. I think none of the Indian players understood what was going on. Hyderabad itself was going through so many wars of succession. After the Asaf died, his son Nasir Jung, Muzaffar Jung, and finally, all of them engaging the European powers in these wars of succession. They thought these were yet another player on the chessboard, not realizing the far-reaching, motives and designs that these people had, be it the French or the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese, everyone was hovering around. And you had the Marathas on one side, you had Mysore, you had the Arcot Nawab and the Nizam, all of them in a potpourri of disaster.
And very rich and thriving economies, right?
Yes. And no scruples whatsoever. You had the Nizam also actually signing up with the British in the first Anglo-Mysore war. And without the British also knowing, on the side he was having parleys with Hyder Ali. And in the midst of the war, the British see that suddenly he is taking a retreat and going the other side and actually joining the person whom he's supposed to battle with. So scruples, principles, ethics, nobody. So that way everyone is on even keel. But what you said was right, but there was propaganda art everywhere, Kaveri. Even when Tipu and Hyder won this very significant war called the Battle of Polilur in the midst of the second Anglo-Mysore war, you have paintings of that on the walls of the Darya Daulat Palace in Srirangapatna. The British put it on a war footing and on an international scale, obviously. The conquest of Srirangapatna was something so significant for them. That probably laid the foundations for the British Empire, and Tipu and Hyder were one of their biggest obstacles. No two ways about that, that they were the last kind of bastions against colonial against British rule. I won't say colonial because Tipu took the support of French. He also invited Zaman Shah to invade India. He called the Shah of Persia, the Amir of Turkey, all of them to come and invade India.
It was the same strategy, right? Use foreign powers to attack your own, enemies.
We give Tipu a lot of importance because of the larger narrative of anti-British equal to heroism. But if the British had lost, maybe the French would be ruling India. And in Karnataka, probably French would be the language that everyone would speak. It took us a lot more time to get, freedom for Pondicherry, to make it Puducherry. So the French colonial designs were no less than what the British had.
Right. But are there still documents and books and letters? Because Tipu seems to have been a very prolific letter writer, and of course his book of dreams that you talk about. I mean, there was a lot of writing that he was doing.
Indeed.
Yeah. So are there still things that are not translated which could be surprising to us?
So in fact, there is the Dreams of Tipu Sultan is that famous play which Girish Karnad has also written. But what were the dreams? So every morning after waking up, it is said Tipu Sultan would spend about an hour or two in his toilet, and that is where he would sit and jot down all that he saw the previous night.
Precursor to Sigmund Freud.
Yes. So in fact, I got these dreams analyzed with the help of a psychologist, because dreams are the index of your mind. So there are violent dreams, everything about destruction, about kafirs, about how they need to be annihilated and all of that. And he wrote copiously. Now when the fort fell, Srirangapatna fell in 1799, all these books, all these papers, the British, for them, Tipu was an enigma, as he is to all of us today, even now, after 200 plus years. So they transported all of this back to London. A lot of it was translated, thick volumes of various, translations and annotations of his papers, his letters. They were all scrutinized. And a lot of that still rests in London. So as a researcher, when I was at the British Library, I had goosebumps when I actually held in my hand that diary, which he would actually write in his own hand. It is still preserved in London. In Farsi. Yes. A lot of it is translated, semi-translated. Some probably we wouldn't even know. I actually saw his own handwriting, the way the diary was. And there are translations of it, but some are lost in translation too. So I got all of that retranslated to get the original voice to speak.
But so, let's come to the crunch. Was he a villain? Was he a hero? Was he somewhere in between? And does that depend also on the community to which you belong, the caste to which you belong, and the time of, considering whether he's a hero or villain?
You finally brought the elephant into the room, which is, these tags of hero or villain is not something I subscribe to, because who defines what is heroism and what is villainy? If we are seriously trying to assess, particularly his social report card, I think that was horrendous.
Why is that? Yeah.
So Hyder Ali, he was actually bought by the Maharaja of Mysore as paying a ransom for him and freeing him. Within 12 years, this man, through his Machiavellian moves, manages to overthrow the Maharaja and take over, usurp the kingdom. But Hyder was very astute. He realized that it was a Hindu majority kingdom, and so he had to placate the Hindus there. So there weren't overt means of conversion or destruction in Mysore. It happened during conquest outside. But I think Tipu got the kingdom on a platter, and that also led him to a lot of hubris. The arrogance and the intoxication of power that comes in. He literally dug up his own grave. In the numerous conquests that happened in Malabar, in Kerala, to this day, I think a lot of people hate him. In Coorg, the Kodavas of Coorg, 70,000, 60,000, upwards of this number being brutally massacred. In Mangalore, the Christians as well. The Christians, almost 70,000 of them, literally dragged, to the feet of an elephant all the way from Mangalore to Srirangapatna. Many dying on the way. Churches being destroyed, temples being destroyed. We are in the week of Deepavali. You have the Mandya Mayangars in and around Melkote, who do not celebrate Diwali to this day after 250 years, because 700 members of their family were killed on the day of Deepavali by Tipu Sultan.
It's the psychic memory, right?
Yeah, intergenerational trauma. So they, to this day, commemorate that as a day of mourning. So these are very, oral traditions which have survived generations. So that's why when the Tipu Jayanti was being celebrated by the Congress government in Karnataka, the BJP, the politics apart, they were individuals who, came out in protest. The Christians had nothing to do with the BJP's politics, but the Christian groups there opposed this. The Kodavas opposed this. The Mandya Mayangars, the Nayars in Kerala, who were brutalized. And there are lots of documented evidence in the chapter 20 of the book. I talk in detail about, all the temples that were destroyed across various parts of, in Coorg, even dead people were converted. There are letters of Tipu Sultan. Since he wrote so much, Hyder was illiterate. The only achievement of his life was to learn to sign the first alphabet of his name, which was her. But Tipu was a very educated man, so he wrote copiously. And there are letters, you don't need any interpretation. He writes letters to his generals saying, go there, destroy this, kill so many people, and also gloats about it. Saying, in this campaign, I converted 1 lakh people, I killed so many people, so many were circumcised. Dead bodies would be circumcised and declared as Muslim. So, on the one hand, we can say that this was a different era, an era of tortures,
which is true. Yeah.
But was there a targeted, what is a genocide? A genocide is when you target someone selectively on the basis of their identity. Collateral damage in wars is something that is happening to this day. You see in the Middle East, you see in Russia, Ukraine, everywhere. But is a group being targeted only because of their identity, their religion, and so on? If that is that, then it is a double whammy here. So in the case of Tipu, the antipathy for people who did not belong to his faith is very, very evident. His manifesto talks about that. The inscription on his sword says, this sword is to be drenched in the blood of kafirs. So when that is so explicit, I don't think we need to provide cover fire for that. And this Tipu Jayanti and other things, I think it's fine if some group of people celebrate it in private. A Tipu fan club, someone celebrates. But a democratically elected government on taxpayers' money actually eulogizing somebody who caused so much of harm to different communities whose memories last even to this day, I think that is a travesty. You won't have a Hitler Jayanti being celebrated back in Germany to this day, right? So I think that peace with the past, to be able to tell the truth as it is and not use these people as cover fire for your electoral politics, I think that is very important.
And yet he is the same person who advanced so much of science and technology. So you cannot ignore that as well, right?
Yes. So as I said, it is not a hero or a villain,
exactly.
White and black. I think characters of history are shades of grey. There are more than 50 shades of grey when it comes to human beings. And to understand...
Shades of Grey reminds me of a line that you've written about his taste in young boys, which could be interpreted in any way
multiple
possible.
ways. Yes, yes. So I think that was a common thing to have, bring them and make them eunuchs and so on.
Purchase them.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you have to not pigeonhole people by yardsticks and definitions of today, but at the same time, you should not whitewash their crimes to make them somewhat, appealable to people of today, communities of today. The Muslims of Karnataka need not have to look at Tipu Sultan as their icon or role model. And to win their votes, you don't have to erase his crimes. At the same time, using him as a ploy to target a community today, that also is equally bad.
Exactly.
So,
which is what I love about your work, Vikram, that you put it out there and it's the truth as it is, unvarnished. But anyone who wants to sort of appropriate you to their cause will find it, will find it a little difficult,
Yes, because I end up offending everyone because I don't belong to either camp.
Which is, I think, the best way a historian should be. But tell me, when you look at Savarkar, Tipu, I wonder what is going to be your next subject, your next project. I mean, I really do.
Well, lots of things in the pipeline, but at the moment, I've actually established a foundation called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR. Yes, to actually promote this, probably, foster new scholarship, clone many more Vikrams perhaps in the process, so that more books come out. I think the answer to distorted history is only and only scholarship. It is not social media wars. It is not on Twitter fights that you are going to sort this out. Evidence-based, fact-based, truth-based history which needs to be written in a manner, spoken and articulated in a manner which the common people actually, connect with. So FIHCR is doing this. We actually have given out a scholarship based on Sir Jadunath Sarkar, in the name of Jadunath Sarkar, to 9 scholars to actually write books. At the end of 1 year, there'll be 9 books coming out. We are also trying to collaborate with educational institutions, including Nalanda University, to do a project on very, compelling issues of history which we'll revisit, and also reach out to young people, children and young adults, to make history interesting, exciting and inspiring for them. I remember in school, the maximum punishment I used to get was for history. I would always be found kneeling down outside class because I couldn't memorize who succeeded whom and in which year. So, whereas history is a mirror in which we can identify ourselves as a nation, as a people. And so it being taken to the younger generation in the best possible way is the imperative need. Governments are doing nothing about it. So private initiative is what we are trying to do.
And I think it's wonderful that you also recognized S.L. Bhairappa, the Professor Bhairappa, I think.
He's 94.
He's 94. And really one of the institutions in history who sort of had been ignored or sort of, so I think that is very significant. And talk a little about that.
Yeah, in fact, Dr. Bhairappa was someone who was on the textbook committee during, I think, Indira Gandhi's rule, and he writes that in the foreword.
And he writes that, and he writes the...
How he was summarily dismissed from the committee only because he said the true facts of history need to be mentioned. So the chairman of the committee says, let's not talk about destruction, all of this, because it will somehow upset social harmony today.
Right.
Now, a truth is a truth. I can't wish away my past. If I take my child to Hampi or Konark and someone asks who destroyed this, or the Martan temple in Kashmir, he's bound to ask who destroyed this and why. So what answer? Your school textbook is painting a completely different picture. Right. So tell the truth as it is. The onus or the albatross of the atrocities of the past does not lie on the communities of today.
Exactly, which is very important.
And conversely, the past need not be whitewashed to make communities today feel very secure and safe. We openly talk about the atrocities that the British did. We talk of Churchill as a killer.
We don't talk enough actually. No, we should talk more.
We talk. I mean, they are demonized in all our popular media. The British is always the bad guy. But we don't care that the Christians of India are going
played by Americans, by the way.
Yeah. No, but then when we do that, or we talk about the atrocities of the British, we never worry that the Christians of India will feel offended because they belong to the same religion. Why is that? But when we talk about the Mughals, when we talk about Tipu, Ghori, Ghazni, somehow this hyphenation, that talking about them will upset communities today. I think that is being very disingenuous. And communities today should also not hero worship these people. There are people who go to Aurangzeb's mazar and offer prayers. Now he was a demon of sorts who destroyed so many temples. He killed so many people, and the Sikh gurus included, the kind of tortures that were done. So place them as they are with warts and all. There is no black and white. Let the multiple shades of grey actually illuminate our understanding of our past.
Wonderful. Just the last point, I think about the Delhi-centric view of history, which is very important, that we have to overcome that as well. We're sitting in the south and we have to talk more about the heroes and villains and the shades of grey in the south as well. I think that's very important.
Yeah, the rising south is the theme of the
Yes.
summit. South Indian history or stories hardly feature in our textbook.
yeah.
In the NCERT current textbook, I think the Cholas, Pandyas, all of these are disposed of in a map or
Right.
one or two lines. The Vijayanagar Empire hardly gets half a paragraph. The Northeast doesn't get featured.
course.
But the South particularly, considering such empires like the Rashtrakutas and the Shatavahanas and all of them ruled from here, the Vodeyar, the Travancore rulers, I think when we talk of history of Bharat or history of India, every part of it needs to be included in that. Bharat needs to snatch back her history from the clutches of Delhi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Kaveri.
Please
Thank you.
do look up the books outside, get them signed by the author, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.